Our program today is devoted to the work of Zhanatai Shardenov, a people's artist of the Republic of Kazakhstan, and our guest is Amir Jadaybayev, a PhD in the history of art. My first question to you is related to the special role Zhanatai Shardenov has played in the formation of Kazakh national landscape. How would you characterize the peculiarities of this artist's creative method? First of all, I would like to say that the work of Zhanatai Shardenov is a striking phenomenon in the 20th century visual arts of Kazakhstan in general. He is unsurpassed master of landscape, a recognized master of paysage, and today we see that the new generation perceives Shardenov as our contemporary, although even during his lifetime he was quite known among professionals and art lovers. Everyone emphasized his specific artistic method and his unique painting style. He possessed a special pasty way of painting and a very tactile texture, which most likely stems from the fact that he studied the applied art of the Kazakhs. It is the tactility of takimet carpets which organically turns into painting. It is important to note that French Impressionists were also among his teachers when he was studying art at the Almaty Art College. His teacher was Abram Cherkassky, a renowned Impressionist painter. In other words, the origins of this style go back to his college years of apprenticeship. But it's important to note here that Shardenov improved this method, making it original and bringing into it a lot of his own originality, his own uniqueness. First of all, it is manifested in its bright emotionality, spontaneity, and immediacy, as well as improvisation in his work. When we look at Shardenov's paintings, we see that they stand out thanks to a very dense, pasty, colorful layer. And from a man in the street point of view, this is not a very rational use of paints and art materials. What do you think Shardenov was guided by when choosing this artistic technique? I think Shardenov came to this method not through logical thinking, but intuitively. When working on a landscape, he would change it again and again. Therefore, the layers kept adding up. Maybe, as he himself often put it, he came to the conclusion that such a tactility of the colorful texture allows him to express his emotions more accurately. It is precisely this tactile and massive pictorial texture which is present on his canvases and cardboard. It would also be appropriate to recall the alla prima technique when he would paint most of his works at one sitting, so to speak. What was it motivated by? Was it the desire to capture the short-term changeable state of nature? Or the need to quit right away? Or spontaneity? How would you explain it? Yes, you are right. All of these factors were present because he was an artist and because he had studied the history of art. He understood that the alla prima work gives certain positive benefits, namely the capturing and fixing of the first, most vivid impression. The change of nature and light occurs very fast, therefore in a half-an-hour time span, the artist has to catch some special effects of the atmosphere. Of course, he was guided by this, and I think in this regard it was traditional, because even the French Impressionists worked in the same vein, absolutely. Were there tendencies, a craving for experimentation in his work? If so, how did they manifest themselves? Yes, all of his work is practically experimental. From the moment he started exhibiting in the late 50s, he kept on experimenting. But again, it came from the heart, not out of his brain. What was it that made Shardenov unique in contrast to his colleagues? They themselves admitted this, emphasizing that Shardenov was a down-to-earth artist inspired by his ancestors. He was the least theoretically savvy of them all. He was simple, but in a positive sense of the word. Like his colleague Zhanatai, Shardenov is simple. But it's very difficult to be simple. His works are simple but also complex. And in terms of experimentation, let's look at his latest works. They're practically abstract. Over time, thanks to liberalization as well as to the fact that he was an honored artist, he was allowed to do things that young artists were forbidden to do. Today we can safely say that as a person and a national artist, Shardenov had hugely contributed to the development of national culture as a whole, as well as the discovery of a new type of landscape. And today he stands out on a par with European and world artists. He was underestimated, and our discussion today is one of the steps in the popularization of his work, which is a unique cultural phenomenon of the 20th century. Looking at these dense, literally tactile clouds of smoke, we involuntarily recall the legendary Gare Saint-Lazare series by Claude Monet. When you admire both these metal structures and these incredible speeds, as well as this power, which together with the clouds of smoke and steam bursts into space, bewitching the onlooker with its special beauty. This is a phenomenon of the technogenic world. I totally agree with Amir Jadaibayev, who said that Shardenov partly started from Impressionism, but overgrew it. And indeed, he was looking for and found an individual author's style which was uniquely his own and distinguished him from the entire variety of Kazakhstani artists. This is a dense, pasty and unusual painting which commits to memory.
Создавая свои живописные картины, художник буквально замешивает.
Creating his paintings, the artist literally kneads paints right on the surface of the canvas. What is more, the thickness of the layer is at times quite tangible and palpable, with the paint layer reaching 2 or more centimeters. Therefore, the paintings took a very long time to dry up. But sometimes, in an effort to enhance the expressiveness of the external texture of the paint layer, the artist would add special loose materials, creating the effect of caked lava. But in these abstract forms there would always emerge a connection with nature, when we see a rising tree crowns and loose snow and a completely magical action that the artist admires and seeks to convey in his painting. Without doubt, Shardenov was very talented and very ambitious. In the 40s, 50s, when he was studying at the Almaty Art College with Abram Cherkassky as one of the teachers, he was known to have said to his fellow students, "I will surpass the skill of my teacher, Abram Cherkassky." His fellow students would laugh at it, but we now see that Shardenov had fulfilled his promise in many ways. Because he became an outstanding master, and like Abram Cherkassky, he preferred the genre of the urban landscape. What is more, take note that creating recognizable corners of old Almaty, filled with the special atmosphere of his hometown, so beloved by both Almaty residents and visiting guests, he creates chamber compositions. Why so? Because he created most of his compositions directly in the open air. He created sketches which were made in a alla prima at one sitting. They were created in one go, because it was important for the artist to capture and convey this short-term, momentary state of nature. Hence, the special state of cloudy weather, this beloved iconic, recognizable image of the arch of the Central Park of culture and leisure, a favorite walking place for the townspeople, and of course the special state of winter, which was the artist's favorite season, and he painted it, deeply understanding and feeling this amazing time of the year. The Alatau foothills appear in the works of Shardenov in a wide diversity of variations. Similar to the Impressionists, it was important for him to show the changeable, transitional state of the weather, nature, time of day, season. It's interesting that his friend and colleague, an outstanding watercolorist Uke Ajiyev, recalling the work of Zhanatai Shardenov, said, "Zhanatai, like no one else, knew how to paint mountains and snow. Professional artists know that painting snow is extremely difficult because of its many shades and a specific texture of snow, which is very hard to paint, both in watercolors and oil paints." Amazingly, in Shardenov's work, snow and mountains were what inspired him most of all. Previously mentioned Ajiyev recalled that when he came to visit the sick Shardenov, Zhanatai exclaimed, "If something happens to me, who will paint snow and mountains?" Take a look at this painting. How much light and air there is. How many endless jubilations of life there is in it. I also want to draw your attention to one more point: the size of most of Shardenov's paintings. Almost half of his paintings are standard 50 by 70 centimeters cardboard. Why? This is the most convenient format that you can, so to speak, take under your arm and go anywhere. To the mountains, which gave him inspiration to paint his sketches, which gave him the joy of creativity, and paradoxically became a significant part in the history of Kazakhstani art.
Натюрморт как самостоятельный жанр встречается у Жанатая Шарденова.
Still life as an independent genre is rare in Zhanatai Shardenov's work. But already in the early compositions we see that he intuitively groped for and sought to look for and find. This is the very characteristic pasty style of painting, which professionals call the imposter technique. It is interesting that here, in the image of flowers, their rich, intricate texture, lush petals, is the very desire to show the fullness of flowering. He sets himself a specific task: to show not only color, but also their characteristic volume, relief, almost sculpturality in painting. He tried to find and show this in his paintings. Despite the fact that this work was created in the early period of his oeuvre, it already possesses the recognizable features of Zhanatai Shardenov's individual style. This work was signed as Sharden. He often signed his early works discarding the OV ending of his surname. It is interesting that Martyros Saryan, the painter of Armenian extraction, said, "I used to know one Chardin, the Frenchman, Jean-Baptiste. Now I am happy to discover the Kazakhstani Chardin." Carefully observing and peering into nature, he sensitively and subtly captures and looks closely at various phenomena. He feels well the texture of mountain tectonic faults, the looseness of snow, and the texture of trees' crowns. But he is interested in and worries about water. It is an absolutely amazing element, mesmerizing, creating a play of effects, reflections. And here, focusing, he is building the composition in such a way as to simultaneously convey both the depicted object and its reflection in the water. This is a beautiful and meditative presentation of reflections which build the picture. And of course a fascinating by its charm landscape which has captured the early, just beginning autumn. With the help of wide brush strokes, the artist is literally carving the entire structure of space, both in the image of the house and the crowns of trees, as well as in the image of the water surface. And he creates a kind of a parallel reality, no less bewitching and beautiful than the one in which the artist lives. He praises it in his works.
В которой живет художник и воспевает ее в своих произведениях. Зная, что Шарденов отдает предпочтение этюдам, обращение к монументальному формату произведений является достаточно редким для этого художника.
Shardenov prefers sketches. This is why turning to a monumental format is quite rare for this artist, almost exclusive. Of course, it is impossible to create such a piece in a sketch or plein air. Such an artwork is already created in the artist's studio. And once again, the artist mixes in a very interesting way the elements of the city landscape with the landscape of mountains, his favorite theme and his highest priority. The artist depicts another legendary point of Almaty, the Cocktober Mountain, a favorite walking place for the townspeople. He creates this picture in the mid-70s. Many people show up here. It is they, the people, who are the soul of the city. They fill the urban space with life. In the center of the composition, we observe the appearance of the bride and groom, the wedding scene, which is always filled with joy, exaltation, and some kind of special hope. The mountains here act as a place of action, a kind of background scene against which the action unfolds. And at the same time, the mountains remain the main participants, the main actors in this amazing, wonderful painting. Choosing one or another panorama, building it into the composition of his painting, the artist each time sets himself certain pictorial objectives. When painting an image of a gorge with a turn in the road, the important thing for the artist is not only to clearly achieve a compositional solution, but also to convey the special pre-twilight state of the scene. To achieve this, he selects saturated colors, which he applies to the surface of the canvas with a white brush and applying dynamic, moving strokes. For instance, he chooses open blue or lilac shades. This helps convey the atmosphere of twilight, some special state of the blueness of the shadows. In other words, this natural mobility in the play of light and shade, in the changeability of the weather, is what he was trying to capture and convey with the help of visual means of the pictorial language.
Передавать при помощи визуальных средств живописного языка. Создавая многие свои картины, Zhanatai Shardenov буквально балансирует на грани.
While creating his paintings, Zhanatai Shardenov literally balances on the verge of figurative and abstract art. Because at first glance, many of his paintings are perceived as abstract, divorced from reality. When you begin to look closely, to listen to the artist's energetic vibes, you can feel and see how out of chaos a specific pictorial image is being born. The title of this painting, created in the late 70s, is The Symphony of the Sunset. In it, the artist, in an amazing way, like the Impressionists, seeks to convey and capture a fleeting moment of the changeable state of nature. It is when the setting sun paints the line of mountains in the background in local red color, while the gradually deepening twilight absorbs the outlines of the objects, and we observe the gradually dissolving, curving silhouette of the road and the trees that encircle this road. Gradually, all this sinks into darkness, and in this state, one can also feel a harmony of its own kind. The complex color palette of this painting undoubtedly characterizes Shardenov as a powerful colorist, a daring artist, who had walked along this borderline between abstractionism and reality. It so happened that Shardenov met the last hour of his life when he was painting his sketch motif in the Medeo Gorge, and probably for a creative person it was great happiness, because it was the mountains, the main love of his life, that accompanied him throughout his entire creative life. This also happened a few days after he had been awarded the title of People's Artist of the Republic of Kazakhstan. and undoubtedly the recognition of his talent, both in this country and abroad, indicates that the name of Zhanatai Shardenov is inscribed in Kazakhstan's history of art, while his wonderful paintings are rightfully included in the golden font of Kazakhstani painting.